There is a particular kind of regret that doesn't fade with time. It's not loud, it doesn't interrupt your day. It simply sits quietly in the back of your mind, and every so often, usually late in the evening when the house is finally still, it taps you gently on the shoulder. For one woman, that regret had a name, a sister, and words that were never said in time. Her name was Margaret, and her story, the one I'm about to tell you, is not really about her sister at all. It's about what she finally understood, years later, about peace. And I think, by the end of this, you may understand something about your own quiet regret too. Almost everyone carries something like this. A friendship that faded because neither person picked up the phone first. A parent who passed before an apology could be made. A sibling who became a stranger over something that, looking back, seems almost too small to have mattered. We tend to believe that regret like this is simply something we must live with. That peace, real peace, isn't available to people carrying an unfinished chapter. But that belief isn't quite true, and Margaret's story is a good place to understand why. Margaret and her younger sister Josephine were close the way only sisters who share a childhood can be. They shared a bedroom for 15 years. They knew each other's secrets before either of them had the words to name them. Then, in their 30s, something ordinary happened. The kind of thing that happens in almost every family. A disagreement about their mother's care, about money, about who had sacrificed more, turned into something colder. Words were said. Neither sister was entirely wrong. Neither was entirely right. And then, the way these things often go, silence simply became easier than repair. Weeks became months. Months became years. There was always a reason to wait a little longer before making the call. A holiday would pass, a birthday, and each time, the distance quietly grew by one more year. 22 years later, Margaret received a call from her niece. Josephine had passed away quietly, in her sleep. Margaret sat with the phone in her hand for a long time after the call ended, not crying at first, just still. 22 years of intending to call, and now there was no longer anyone on the other end to call. She told me later that the grief wasn't only for her sister. It was for every version of the conversation she had imagined having, the apology she'd rehearsed 100 times in the shower, in the car, in the quiet moments before sleep. A conversation that would now never happen. For the first 2 years after Josephine's death, Margaret lived almost entirely inside that unfinished conversation. She replayed the original argument. She rewrote it in her head, 100 different ways, always ending differently. She imagined what she should have said instead, on birthdays, at family gatherings, at 3 in the morning. There's a name for what Margaret was caught in. Psychologist Susan Nolen-Hoeksema spent much of her career studying something called rumination, the mind's habit of replaying a painful event again and again, believing that if it just thinks about it enough, it will finally arrive at peace, or fix it, or undo it somehow. But her research found something important, and something almost nobody expects. Rumination doesn't lead to resolution. It leads nowhere. It simply deepens the groove of the same painful thought, over and over, without ever actually changing anything. The mind mistakes repetition for progress. It feels like you're working on the problem. You are actually just standing still inside it. Margaret, without knowing the psychology behind it, had spent 2 years standing very still. What finally changed for Margaret didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened slowly, the way most real change does. It began with a simple question a grief counselor asked her, almost in passing. What would it look like to grieve this, instead of trying to solve it? Margaret hadn't considered there was a difference. She had spent 2 years trying to solve an unsolvable problem, a conversation that could no longer happen. The counselor gently suggested something else entirely. That some things in life are not puzzles waiting for the right combination of words. Some things simply need to be grieved and then, eventually, gently set down. Not forgotten, not excused, simply set down. The way you might finally set down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you'd forgotten it was even in your hands. Here is what Margaret came to understand, and it is, I think, the heart of this entire story. Contentment was never going to arrive by fixing the past. It couldn't. The past, by definition, cannot be edited. What Margaret was actually searching for, in all those replayed conversations, was control over something that had already, permanently, left her hands. Real peace didn't arrive when she finally found the perfect version of the apology. It arrived when she stopped needing to, when she allowed the story to end exactly where it had actually ended, imperfect, unfinished, human, instead of the version she kept trying to force it into. She began writing letters to Josephine that she never intended to send, not to fix anything, simply to say what she needed to say, out loud, to someone who could no longer respond, but who she could finally, gently, let go of, holding on to so tightly. If there is someone in your life like Josephine, a relationship left unfinished, a conversation you keep quietly rehearsing, I want to offer you the same question that changed things for Margaret. Are you trying to solve this? Or is it time to simply grieve it? Those are two very different tasks. One keeps you circling the same painful thought forever, believing the next replay will finally bring relief. The other, harder as it may feel at first, actually leads somewhere. It leads to setting the weight down. This doesn't mean the relationship didn't matter. It means the opposite. It mattered enough that it deserves an ending, even an imperfect one, rather than an endless loop with no ending at all. Margaret is in her late 70s now. She still thinks of Josephine, often actually. But it no longer arrives the way it used to, as a wound reopening. It arrives more like a photograph, something she can look at with warmth, even with sadness, without being pulled back into the spinning wheel of what if. She told me something I've thought about many times since. She said, "I used to think peace meant the regret would disappear. It didn't disappear. I just stopped fighting it. And somehow, that was enough." Contentment was never about erasing the parts of your story you wish had gone differently. Every life well lived has at least one Josephine in it, a relationship, a choice, a chapter that didn't end the way you would have written it. Peace doesn't come from rewriting that chapter. It comes from finally allowing it to be finished. So, if there is a conversation you've been quietly rehearsing for years, one that can no longer be had, I'll leave you with Margaret's question, and I think it's worth sitting with tonight, in your own quiet moment, long after this video ends. Are you still trying to solve it? Or is it finally time to grieve it and set it down? I'd love to know, is there a Josephine in your own story? Someone or something you've been quietly carrying? You don't have to share the details. Just tell me, in the comments, if this found you today. Sometimes simply saying it out loud is where the setting down begins.